Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to talk about Agile methodology and how it is different from the traditional waterfall model. If you are new to Agile, this video might be helpful for you to understand the basics of Agile. So without wasting any time, we will just move on to the next slide. Starting with what is Agile. Agile is basically a way of working in an iterative manner with the continuous improvements and frequent releases. Uh, if you are aware of the traditional software development methods like the waterfall model, what happens in the traditional method is like first the planning would be done, then the development, then testing, and finally deployment will happen. So this waterfall model would be generally useful when the entire scope of the project is known in advance, whereas the agile methodology is useful for complex projects where the requirements changes frequently, like if there are any technology changes happens frequently or the other functionality changes happen frequently. So in such cases, in such complex projects, the agile methodology is preferred. uh, Talking about the iterative approach here, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have a software development requirement wherein you are going to develop around five functionalities of the software. Okay, so what happens in the traditional waterfall model is you will be releasing all these five functionalities at the end of the release cycle. But in case of agile, you will be working in an iterative approach. Let's say in the first iteration, you will develop the first functionality. In the second iteration, you will develop the next two functionalities. And in the third iteration, you might develop the remaining two functionalities. And you will side by side, you will release them with each iteration. So when I say iteration here, it means a time frame. It could be anything like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, depends upon how complex the functionality or your software requirement is. Based upon that, the iterations will be decided. It varies project to project. And talking about the continuous improvements here, so when you are delivering or releasing the functionalities of your project, of your software in the iterations, you are side by side getting the feedback also from the business users or the stakeholders on that functionality. So let's say that you have in the first iteration you have developed certain functionality, so you will showcase the working model of that functionality to the stakeholder at the end of that iteration, and based upon that working model, that stakeholder or the business user will provide you feedback. So what generally will happen is there is a chance like you have the requirements well documented and you have developed the product based upon that requirement only, but stakeholders and the business users will have a vision of the product, and when they see the actual working product, they will come to know whether it is going in the correct direction or not, and they might have certain different thoughts about it, and they can provide their valuable feedback on the functionality that you have developed, and at the same time you can make the changes based upon their feedback. But that is not the case with the waterfall. In waterfall, entire functionality will be all the functionalities or the entire product would be delivered to the stakeholders at the end, and in between the presentations will be presented, which does not give them the exact idea of the project. But here, since we are presenting the working models, it is like getting the feedback is easier and implementing them will add more value to the product. Now that's what is mentioned in the first 2 points, like the continuous incremental improvements, like it is based upon the user or the stakeholder feedbacks, and small and frequent releases, because after each iteration you will be releasing the functionality, and teams are delivering the value faster because you are getting the feedback, valuable feedback from the business users, so you are creating a value added product and you are delivering it in a faster manner. So that is what the first 2 points are about. Moving on to the next point, agile is a mindset philosophy, whereas scrum is a framework for getting work done. Now, a lot of people confuse Scrum with Agile, but actually, Agile is a way of working. It is a method that has certain values and principles using which the development can be done faster and output will be more adaptive. Whereas Scrum is a framework, it means if your organization, let's say, if your organization has decided to adopt Agile methodology, now what would be your first step? You need to have a certain framework to start with, so you can use the Scrum framework. What the Scrum will have is, it will have certain events and roles which will help you implement the Agile method. I'll be making detailed video on a Scrum framework. You can come back to the channel, or you can subscribe to the channel for getting the notification on same. Moving on to the next point, like there are apart from Scrum, there are other Agile frameworks also using which you can implement the Agile methodology. Like there is Lean, Kanban, DSDM, XP, Crystal, etc. Moving on to the next slide. What are the disadvantages of waterfall model? Now, what are the disadvantages because of which organizations are moving from waterfall to Agile? Changes are difficult and expensive. Waterfall method generally discourages changes to the project scope because extensive amount of time is spent in the beginning trying to get the plan right. In the planning phase only, a lot of time is spent for analyzing, gathering the requirement, getting the requirement verified from the business users and the stakeholders, because the plan has to be right. So, and changes are definitely discouraged in this process. Reason being, if you have worked in the waterfall model, you might know, like there is a long change management processes involved. Like first, the project manager will go and get the all the change requirement details from the stakeholders, and then finally they will be documenting all those changes, and relevant details like what will be the impact of this change, whether there will be any risk will be involved, when to schedule the change, what are the costs related to it, and finally it will be approved from the stakeholder once again, and then it will be finally implemented. So it is like that, change management itself is a big process in the waterfall model. So that's why it is difficult also, and it is expensive also in terms of time as well as cost. Uh, Whereas if you come to Agile is more adaptable to changes, it is more flexible, and as the requirement changes frequently, a team is being trained for adapting to the frequent changes, and Agile is more flexible. So Agile is known for changing requirements. Moving on to the next point, longer time to market. So the waterfall model is designed for long-term projects and is completed sequentially. Like each phase of the project depends upon the previous phase. It requires a complete completion of the previous tasks before any work can be released. So all the tasks should be completed, and then only the product will be finally released. So it generally takes a longer time to the market. Whereas Agile, it uses a short iterative approach and it delivers the value rapidly. Coming to the communication, next point is like communication is more formal between stakeholders and team. Why they are telling this way is, in the agile environment, or the agile project development methodology, the emphasis is on informal communication between the developers and the stakeholders. So there is a constant communication would be happening between the stakeholders and the team members or the developers who are working on the development to get the details from the stakeholders if required. That is how the events would be planned. There will be multiple meetings held in which the stakeholders will also be involved along with the developers. So if that the developers have any questions, they can ask them about the requirement if some things are not clear. And even if the developer is not asking, the stakeholder wants to give any feedback, they can give in those meetings. So there is like two-way communication is happening all the time in the agile project. But communication is lot more formal in when it comes to waterfall model. They will be generally detailed reports, progress reports will be created, and presentations will be created in waterfall model, which will be shared with the stakeholders. So there is like a formal communication via documentation would be done in the waterfall model, which is not the case in agile, and is more like a face-to-face communication in or via the meetings. The the team members and the stakeholders will be communicating. So that is the one of the disadvantage of waterfall model. Next one is working models aren't available until the later stage of a project. So Agile allows for a quick delivery of projects with shorter life cycles, as each iteration delivers a workable product, whereas waterfall requires the completion of all tasks before any work can be released, as I mentioned. So until the later stage of the project, until all the tasks are completed, a workable model will not be visible to the business users or the stakeholders, whereas in the agile frame like agile methodology, at the end of every iterations there will be reviews in which the workable model will be presented in front of the stakeholders, and they can provide feedback on the basis of that. So that are some of the disadvantages of waterfall model. And please let me know like if you want some more videos on any other agile topics. I'm planning to make videos on agile manifesto and scrum framework. So do subscribe to the channel so that you can get the notification, and like this video and comment if you liked it, like whatever, if you want to comment anything, any other topic that you want the video on, like you can just provide your feedback. Thank you for watching.